Lynn and I are super excited to share what we know about online learning with you and hopefully help you get through this difficult time where you've got kids home and you're trying to facilitate learning for them. So before we dive into our topic today, I'm actually going to tell you just a little bit about our book. You can see the cover on the screen here. It's called The Online Survival Guide. So Lynn and I have been teaching online for a long time. Lynn's been teaching online for over a decade, and when I tried to think back, I think it's been since about 2003 or 4 that I've been teaching online. And uh, what we noticed in our teaching is that there were certain hurdles or problems that seem to be common to students. And we decided that we really wanted to just do some research to see if the things we noticed were actually true problems and try to think of ways we could help students with that. So we actually embarked on a research project that took 3 years, and we had the opportunity to interview students and also to survey over 300 students during that time. And what we found was we really had a good idea of what the difficulties students were facing. So definitely all the tips in the book are designed by us as educators to help students to get over those hurdles. And it's a great book really for anybody who's entering the world of online learning, in really regardless of age. So definitely, I know we have a lot of middle school parents here today. That's a great age to start in with these habits, all the way up through college. Lynn and I teach at community colleges. So that was our the data set that we had. But really what we found is this applies to everyone. So we're really excited to share some tips from our book with you today. So without further ado, we will jump right into our webinar. So we decided to call our webinar Pause, Reset, Reflect. And the reason that we chose that was basically we're thinking about parents and we're thinking about where you're at right now. We know that as educators, when we start a new school year or a new class, it takes a couple of weeks for us to really understand what our students are like, what the group dynamic is like, and what is going to work. And we think that right now, as parents, you guys actually are at an advantage because you've gotten through that initial 2 or 3 week scramble to sort of get things settled in your homes. And now you have information that you can use to put some really longer term, maybe better solutions in place for probably the rest of the school year. I know where we live, schools probably not reconvening this year, and it could be the same for you. So today we're going to ask you to just take a little bit of time. It's so great that you were able to even carve out time to attend the webinar. That says so much about what you're trying to do for your kids. So we're going to ask you to just pause, really think about, so where are you at now? We're 2 or 3 weeks in. How are things looking for you? We'll ask you to reflect, to think about what's going well. What do I know? What have I learned? Really take stock of where you're at and also identify some specific challenges that you'd really like help with. And then reset is basically, we've got some tips and strategies to offer you. And hopefully if you can identify 1 or 2 small areas that you really want to focus on, you can create a little bit of a reset or an action plan for that. So the 4 areas that we're going to be talking about today are expectations, time, motivation, and communication. So we're going to get started with expectations. Just so you know, when we discovered that we were going to be doing this webinar, Lynn and I put on our research caps. So we spent a couple of weeks actually talking to parents with children at all grade levels, as well as educators, because we really wanted to get a feeling for what was going on. One thing we learned about expectations was some parents are putting very high expectations on themselves. That seemed to be the most common theme. Some parents may be feeling like they had to recreate the school day within their home or put in hours of prep time for lessons. And to be honest, that's quite an unrealistic expectation, maybe too high. On the flip side, some parents may be feeling overwhelmed as if, sort of it's too much to manage and they might not have any expectations, which can create apathy. So take a minute to reflect and just ask yourself, where do you think you fall in that spectrum? Are you maybe putting too much pressure on yourself and your child? Are your expectations a little too high? Or do you think you need to develop some healthy expectations? And then in terms of reset, we're just actually gonna move on to the next slide, which has quotes from parents and educators who we spoke with. So we can take a look at that. And it just echoes the things that I mentioned. one thing that was encouraging to us is that it seems like parents have started to adjust their expectations based on what they're learning, which is what we would recommend to you as well. Um, the in the first quote, this parent said that he had to adjust his expectations. He felt as if maybe he knew what his kids could do, or as an adult, he would envision them accomplishing a certain amount of tasks, but he really had to think of it from their position and slow down. And I think anytime we can sort of work on problem solving from our children's or our students' perspectives, it could open up ideas that we might not have thought of otherwise. In terms of the educators we spoke to, we heard the same thing, have realistic expectations. The quote that you see in the orange box, to me, I wish that could be like the entire webinar. That is like the best message. Don't be hard on yourself, but stick with it. If kids are reading, writing, and doing a bit of grade level math each day, they're keeping those skills sharp. And if that doesn't happen every day, that's okay. The big message we got from educators was try every day, do your best every day, commit to really, putting some time in. But then when everything falls apart and you get nothing done that day, don't be hard on yourself. Just every day is like a chance for a fresh start. So the tips that we have around expectations will be on the next slide. And they are to be realistic. So we've already talked about that. You're not a teacher and your home is not a school. It's not a reasonable expectation for you to feel as if you have to become an educator in this moment. You want to make sure that your home is your home first. That's where you and your family spend time together, and it should stay that way, even though schooling is happening there. Definitely commit to doing your best. Small increments of progress add up. And I think, it can feel as if, well, my student was in school for 8 hours a day, but some parents we talked to said, geez, I don't know, after 2 or 3 hours it feels like school's kind of done. That's okay. Those little increments that you're doing are keeping skills sharp and helping those kids. So also you want to keep track of your child's work and encourage them, but it's you want to be more of a coach and a facilitator. You want to encourage them. It's that positive reinforcement that seems to help kids the most. So it's not you're not a teacher. That's not the expectation. It's just to be involved and keep things rolling. Definitely have compassion for yourself and others. This is an important time to go easy on yourself. I think sometimes we put expectations on ourselves to perform a certain way, and this is a time for grace. Educators also, said the same thing. And just so you guys know, as teachers, Lynn and I are definitely we're comfortable working online, and still it's been a scramble, and still it's been hard, and hopefully our students are even having compassion for us too. So I think right now everybody's doing the best they can in the situation that we're in. Definitely stick with it. Consistency is key to being able to get through the end of the school year, and you might need to involve your child in creating some realistic expectations too. We talked to some parents. We actually heard that middle school is a very difficult age, and even in the polling questions that we sent around, it seems like some middle schoolers maybe feel this real pressure to be a perfectionist. Maybe you need to help shape your child's expectations as well, or if they're not really engaged in school, maybe you need to set some expectations with them for what will get the job done. So the next topic we're going to talk about is time. And I actually love time management. Time management is sort of like a hobby for me. I don't know why, but I'm really interested in efficiency strategies and time management strategies. So we have a chapter in our book, chapter 4 is on time management, and it's all the strategies we think are great for online learners around that. So I could have delivered probably a 3-hour webinar today just on time management, but I will spare you that. So right now, the biggest problem is that I think a lot of parents are trying to work from home, juggle their kids' schooling from home, and the more children you have, the more exponentially difficult that is. And then also, you've got to run your household. So that's the issue. When you're reflecting, you can ask yourself, though, you've learned stuff about time. Like when we talked to a couple parents, they said, geez, all of a sudden it seems like school is only taking a couple hours. Okay, well, you didn't know that before, but now you do. Now you know what your job looks like remotely. Maybe you have a good sense of how long that takes you. And so use that information to inform your time management strategies. So as far as resetting, we'll have some strategies for you here. On the next slide, you can see, we talked to some parents. One parent we spoke to had split custody of his children, and he talked about how he took his, what was a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 job, and he totally re-engineered it so that he's pulling really long days on Mondays and Fridays, and then just maintaining his work Tuesday through Thursday when his kids are home with him. This is something that you might not have thought about, but if you truly have the freedom to work anytime you want, you should be able to tailor a schedule that allows for you to get everything in. So I found that like really inspiring. The other, like from educators, we heard a lot about like with time, managing time, meaning like chunk tasks, like break things down. The younger your kids are, the more you can break them down. It's better to have a couple short sessions than one marathon school session. Those things are really helpful. And so on the next slide, we'll have some time management tips. I did want to mention that we read the comments that people who filled out the poll had submitted. And there were a couple specific questions. So I hope when we get to question and answer, you'll resubmit those questions. But I think the big thing is to create a schedule. And I know one person had mentioned having a hard time getting on a schedule. I think you have to sort of take an inventory and think about how long things take. And then I wouldn't recommend the kind of schedule where you're saying at 8 a.m. every day, we dive into schoolwork at 8:45, we take a 5-minute break. At 8:50, we start with math. I think that's too restrictive. So I always suggest like routines to students in online classes. And to me, a routine is something you do at a given time, any day, and it's just activities that go together. So for example, when you wake up in the morning, you probably don't lay in bed and wonder, what am I gonna do now? No, you have a routine. You get up, you brush your teeth, take a shower, eat some breakfast, go to work. You can build those kinds of routines around schoolwork too, especially if you have older kids and especially if you're trying to work from home as well. If you can establish a routine where they get up, they know they have about an hour to do what they want, and then they do 3 or 4 hours of schoolwork, it reduces decision fatigue. So there's not that constant questioning of what do I do now? Now what do I do? And if you can set even some of those routines up like the night before, say, tomorrow when you sit down to do your schoolwork, here's your 2 most important tasks. Before you come see me, get up and get those couple of tasks done, and then we can see what you have left for time. Those kinds of things can really help kids get into routines, and I know students do better with those kinds of routines. So definitely set some of those things up that work for you. Definitely is a good time to delegate responsibilities to every member of the household. One of the parents we spoke to has 7 children, and so she's got her hands full, but she's really delegating responsibilities to some of those older kids. So they're doing some meal prep, they're maybe overseeing schooling for younger kids, or doing informal learning. So it's a time when everybody needs to fit in. Boundaries around time management would be very helpful. It's easy for your day to turn into an amorphous blob. This happens to me quite a bit. If I don't have a dedicated stop time for work, sometimes I look up, it's 5:30, I haven't gotten out of my chair for 5 hours. And so in the past couple weeks, I've tried to put myself on more of a schedule, and I just say like 5 o'clock, I power down and I try not to do any work. If you can create some of those boundaries and divisions and set aside time for the things that are most important to you, it'll help. And then the last 2 are quite simple: chunking the school tasks, breaking them down, especially for younger kids. And you can encourage older children to treat school like a job. Even middle school is not too soon. High school for sure. Those are great job skills. You know, you encourage your child to pick a time to work, and you make them commit to it. And just like they're not going to want to sit down and do schoolwork at that time, that's just like real life. We don't always want to go to work when we have to. So maybe if they start thinking of it in that mentality, it'll help them with that as well. So that's going to wrap up my portion of today's presentation. I'm going to turn it over to my partner, Lynn, and she is going to start with motivation.
Hi, thank you all for being here with us today. And with motivation, if you take a moment and pause, you might find out that you and your online learners are no longer feeling as motivated. In fact, some of you might be experiencing even apathy. And I know in our pre-polling, we heard that some students are actually feeling even grief. And so that's when we start reflecting and asking ourselves, what can we really do to really change the situation now? You've had 4 to 6 weeks by looking at our poll results to be home with your online learners and to kind of see what types of activities are engaging them and which types are not engaging them. And that's when then you'll want to reset and come up with a plan so that you can really be more effective. And once again, we took it out to our parents and our educators who are really in the trenches. And we've got some really great quotes, and I'll just highlight two of them. The first one by a parent really motivates me because she realizes that though there are days she feels very challenged and overwhelmed, she knows that her role right now is so important, and that's how she recharges her battery. And I think for all of you who've joined us today with this webinar, you've already done that. You've taken a precious hour out of your very busy lives. Many of you are juggling jobs outside of the home, all your jobs inside the home, plus this new job as your child's instructor, your child's IT person, your child's counselor, etc. So I think to really know that we've assumed these jobs and a lot of jobs all at once, and know that every day is a fresh time to really get going again. And I think one of our educators really summed it up nicely with the last quote. Think of little ways to incentivize what is going on through the day, and really praising the completed work and small accomplishments. So I just want to kind of condense all this in a set of 6 tips that maybe will help you as you and your child or children with the online learners really try to remotivate. So again, picking up where we left off, making learning fun, incentivize it, incorporate real life skills. And I know for all those middle school parents out there, you're really worried about that transition into high school. Well, use this pandemic that we're going through right now, and maybe have your child keep a video diary or a written diary, a journal of what they're experiencing. They're getting so many skills with that. They're getting writing skills, they're getting history skills, because they're creating their own primary document. And so you can have fun letting them be their own creator and having a voice in how how our future will be told from what they've created. So, and you could be relating it to, the pandemic of the 1918. You can really showcase how other times through history people have struggled. And that really coincides with our second tip. Write a letter, call someone who may be alone, practice math skills in a new way. We had a parent of a grammar school student who took a walk through the neighborhood and got a little phys ed in, plus did some adding and subtracting with the house numbers. Again, we can't stress enough this celebrating work and focusing on all successes, big and small. That's so important. And again, your success today, just reaching out to other parents and educators to figure out what new things you can be doing to remotivate. Breaks are so important. One of our mothers said that it was actually the mother who wrote the quote about how she was feeling like overwhelmed. To really recharge, she stops and has a cup of tea and really acknowledges that her days are different now, and she's grieving the loss of what she had before, just as our children and online learners are grieving. So really encourage rather than pressure your child, because we all have to go through a different process of grieving what should have been and what is now going to be the new norm. And model motivation. We know our kids look up to us and look to us for how we're acting, and it's really hard to do that. But pat yourself on the back every day, and even if you don't get everything accomplished the way you wanted it to be, don't let that steal from your motivation for the next day. And really coinciding with motivation is the last subject we want to talk about, is communication. And just as Jen had said that time is her big passion, communication is my big passion. And it's another chapter in our textbook. And communication is so key, but now more so than ever. So first pause and kind of ask yourself, what is going on in terms of communication? Am I getting too much? Am I getting too little from the school? How am I doing in terms of with my online learners? Am I communicating enough with my children? Am I hearing what they're actually saying? So as you reflect that, think about where you feel like you could change this a little bit so that you're dealing with the communication better. And to do this, you really have to reset and create an action plan. And I think the first quote from a parent is really so significant, because she said, one of the schools that my kid is going to, I'm just getting way too much information, and I literally don't know how to process it all. And then she says that, I have another child maybe is not getting enough information from the school. And she knows both schools are coming is trying to come from the the right direction and do the right thing, but it's hard to gauge what's too much or what's too little. So really, if you could communicate back to the school or have your child do it if he or she is, it's age appropriate, and say, this is a really great amount. I love what you did last week, but this week it's actually a little too much or not enough. That can be really helpful. And the second tip, a quote from a parent, is really helpful as well. We have to realize that because we've been given all these new roles without even asking for them, we're going to feel overwhelmed and not really able to handle it all. Reach out for help and let people know what you're thinking and feeling. So that leads to the last two quotes. Make an effort to communicate with your children's teachers or have them do it if it's appropriate, and really go through what your children are saying to you, monitor their academic activities, but make sure you're really listening when they talk to you and hearing what they say. And that will, I'll kind of condense all this in our tips. Reach out to your child's teacher for help and suggestions. And again, one of our parents is doing weekly emails back to her children's instructors to let them know all the activities that week that went well and some of the ones that didn't go well. And she's also asking those instructors for resources that might be better designed for her children's learning, because she's actually been communicating with her children and listening to what they say. If you're getting inundated with email from the school, maybe create some separate folders on your email account so that you can kind of target them. I know one of our parents wrote in and said, it's becoming overwhelming to prioritize. And that's really tricky. So one tip might be to create these folders and label them in whatever system works for you, but maybe high priority, need to do it now, lower priority, and you can skim each email and then designate it to the different folders and then begin with a clean slate of what needs to be tackled first. Communicating daily with children, your online learners, is so important. And again, I know we're all doing that, but I know when I get really busy with all my own things, I forget to really listen when I ask a question. I'll ask a question, but I'll be multitasking and doing 10 other things. And I know with our kids, it's so easy to do that because sometimes it takes them a while to get to their point. So really practice some active listening. And I think then we can really use what we learn to create that task list, so the next day we can better help our online learner be doing his or her work in a fashion that needs to be done. Or if they're struggling, we can actually help them reach out and get some help. I think one of the most important things is to connect with other parents and form email or text support groups. When I talked about grieving, when I talked about motivation, most of us were at one point dropping our kids off at school, picking them up, going to sporting events. If you have college-age kids, you probably were going to some of their extracurricular activities and cheering them on and talking to other parents. We are no longer able to do that. And so we have to recreate that in some way. And it's a little bit more work on our part, but with social media, we can do that. And in these groups, if you're able to form a parent or a parent-teacher support group via social media, texting, or email, make sure you are honestly sharing with other people. Teachers know that everything they send out is not going to work. We had a parent get 12 pages of math homework at the middle school level with her child, and she couldn't even figure it out, and her child was so frustrated. So she ripped it up and created some assignments that were more appropriate for him. And the teacher was glad to hear that feedback. So Jen and I have hoped that with these various categories and the tips we provided, that you've had some insight. All of these tips that we mentioned and strategies are in our online survival guide, Navigating the Terrain of Online Education. And every tip we provided today, we have a printable that you could get. And all you need to do is email us. And I'm not sure if it's coming up clearly on your screen, because I know with all the images on the screen with our faces, you might not see it, but we have an email address. It's onlinegurus19@gmail.com, and we would love to send you our printables. We would also love to engage in any kind of dialogue with any of you, because we know just based on that pre-polling information that you do have a lot of questions and concerns, and all you want to do is make this experience a positive one for your children. But one thing I just want to say in closing is that you need to take care of yourself first, And that's part of communicating. After you've listened to your children and you've heard what's going on with them, make sure you take care of yourself. And I hope today this was one way to help you. And thank you to Kendall Hunt for offering us this webinar to be able to share some of these tips. And then I think Ryan was going to open it up for questions if anyone has any questions.
Thanks so much. Yep, keep the questions coming in. They're coming in on the chat portal, the Q&A portal, and also on Facebook. I forgot to mention we're on Facebook Live, so getting some questions on there as well. One of them was a parent is struggling with their child lacking motivation and desire. She's not getting the level of education that she's used to. Do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, I would just start by reaching out and saying, communicate with the instructor. And I remember reading something that in the early polling that it was like honors type classes and the work coming home is not honors level. You know, and if you're not feeling like you're getting, if you've already tried to talk to the school and you're not getting anywhere, I would then start looking at some outside resources. There are so many great resources. And I know the crash course videos are in like every subject, and they are used at the high school level and at the college level for some of those 100 and 200 level classes. So those crash course videos could be helpful. You could actually have your child create questions based on what they watch in those videos and answer them. You could also look at some of the AP curriculum. AP put out by the College Board has incredible resources available. So if you're not able to really connect with the school and have them pass on that, those might be some great avenues. Jen, do you have others you'd like to suggest?
I think like in that situation, it's maybe good to adopt sort of the motto that a lot of homeschooling families use, which is like they let their child's interests and desires drive that learning. This could be a time when if the schoolwork isn't feeling rigorous enough, maybe it's a good time to really like try to take a deep dive into an interest that your child has, and use that to get some more challenging material. Maybe if they love reading, have them read a little bit above grade level. Library websites are also great, or any library organizations are great places to contact to find out like what would be appropriate reading lists. So I think in the short term, it's probably, I don't know, how much schools can really pivot at this point, but I agree with Lynn. I think this is a great time to do some self-directed learning and to personalize some of those things for your child.
Yeah, and just to tag on to what Jen said, I know the museums across the globe are turning online, and they've created so many great resources. I know a bunch of the various media have been highlighting them. CBS Sunday Morning has highlighted different museums every week. And just as Jen was saying about, doing some of your own learning, maybe you and your children do a book club with you, or maybe you extend it to friends that are also in similar grade levels and you're all reading the same book. That could be a lot of fun. And I'm thinking about one of the people who took our early poll. She had written in about her middle schooler who was actually quite a good student and now is not feeling quite as energized or motivated. And this particular young student has a passion for golfing. And I think what Jen said about really diving into those interests, maybe you have that young learner delve into the history of golf, or see how golf has changed through time, or really look at some of maybe just different golf it has such a long history, and there might be something that will inspire, or you find books about golfing. But I think to really try to engagement is going to be everything. So I think those could be some great strategies to try to supplement what you're getting from the schools. But it probably at this late date, as Jen said, we're not going to see a lot of big changes going on at this moment.
Thank you.
We do want to say any of these questions that through our email line, gurus19@gmail.com, would love to continue any of these conversations, one-on-one. So please don't feel like this is your last chance to ask any of these questions.
Thank you so much. This attendee sounds a lot like me. They have a 4-year-old, and a lot of their work is on the screen. How do you handle screen time with education and then, leisure apps?
Yeah. So we were talking about this yesterday also. I've been thinking that what really needs to happen is we have to sort of redefine what we mean by screen time. So much of our lives are happening now on a screen that I think we can't lump it all together as just screen time. So, your kids might be visiting their grandparents on a screen. Are you counting that as screen time? I don't think it should really be lumped in. I think in the past we thought of screen time as things like watching YouTube videos, playing games, Snapchatting with friends, those kinds of things. And I think we want, kids especially, and I'm thinking middle school kids probably really need that time to connect with their peers still, but I think we have to differentiate. So to me, I think time you spend at school, yeah, you're in front of a screen, but I wouldn't limit other screen time because of that. I think this is a short-term situation. Being exposed to a screen a little bit extra is probably not the end of the world. We're all going to have to do what we have to do to get through. But I just think you need to think about what are they doing on that screen. Maybe you want to limit their social screen time or entertainment screen time, but I don't, I wouldn't try to be compressing screen time altogether. What do you say? Lynn's granddaughter just turned 3, so Lynn probably has some good suggestions.
And I saw that comment too, and with the early polling, and this is something I know that I talk with my daughter, the mother of my granddaughter, every day, because they really had a no TV time rule, and now there's great programs on TV and on YouTube where you can have these incredible actors read to your child. And so, and my 3-year-old granddaughter doesn't quite understand the difference between why it's okay to talk to Yaya, me, on the screen, but not okay to keep watching Lion King. And so I think first and foremost, what I've been telling my daughter is that you need to survive each and every day, and you've got a lot on your plate, as does every parent talking to us today. And a little bit extra screen time now is not going to damage them at all. Okay, that's the first thing. And I agree with what Jen said, that there are different uses of the screen, and sometimes for a 3 or a 4 or 5 or even a 6 or 7-year-old, it's hard for them to understand that, but we can begin that process. And I think for our middle school and our high school and even college, because we have the college since now, and if you had a college student, you weren't able to oversee what they're doing. Now they're in your home and you are overseeing it. So I think to set up some boundaries with that and talk about what's acceptable use, what is a good use in our household, and for every child it's going to be different. But I just want one thing for all the parents to take away today is you need to lower the expectations of what you're asking of yourself and take care of yourself. And if you have a 4-year-old who needs to watch a little extra screen time so you can have that cup of tea, you need to do that. And there's a lot of great programming on now that I think can be really helpful and beneficial.
Outstanding. Another question. This parent their daughter has her own computer and can work when she works, but she needs help with math. And they've discovered that basic technical knowledge is lacking. It's never really taught in schools. So they struggle teaching them how to utilize that technology. Do you have any tips for that?
When I read that before the webinar started, my first inclination was to reach out to the school and ask the educator at the school to do a Zoom meeting where he or she can be sharing the screen with you. I know whenever I have a student struggling and they just want to email me back and forth, I say, no, we need to have a Zoom so that I can get into your screen and see what you're actually doing, and I can see what you're seeing, or you can see what I'm seeing. I mean, I'll send screenshots and things like that, but I think that might be the first step, really, because you can waste a lot of time and get really frustrated when all it is one click, the educator that can really set you right. And I think, and it also would be a good opportunity for you to be showcasing to your child, wow, this is how we advocate for ourselves and we reach out to get some help.
I also think it made me laugh a little bit when you said you're surprised at maybe the lack of technical knowledge that your child has. And in online education, this is something we find all the time. Faculty who are teaching online classes always assume that younger students will know everything about technology and be able to use everything. And in fact, that's really not true. There's some very basic skills that a lot of traditional age college students lack. So I would just say, if you are in a position where you're having to teach those skills, I think it's a good investment of your time, because you know your child's going to need those skills down the line, and people like Lynn and I will really appreciate you doing that. So as far as that goes, I think this is good. It exposes like a gap where maybe you can teach them some skills that they'll have really throughout their lives. So.
And and just to tag onto that, I agree with what Jen said, that those technical skills that so many people think the younger generation just has. But I do think it's helpful when we alert our educators that, okay, this skill is not there. Because I sometimes assume that a student will know how to do something too. Just for instance, I thought my college students knew how to find their feedback and their quiz comments and their paper comments on the learning management system. And sometimes they don't, and it can be 4 weeks into the semester and you're wondering why they haven't improved any of their work. It's because they didn't know how to find it. And so I try to make these how-to videos and pass them out at the beginning of the semester. As soon as the first quiz comes back, I send it back with a how-to video. And that might be something that your online educator doesn't know yet, because he or she was just thrust into this world so very quickly. So they might assume that your child knows how to do it because maybe in the classroom they did, because all their friends were sitting right there and their friends helped them facilitate it. So I think communicating to the school that maybe, because the school could be sending out maybe some tutorials that could be helpful to both of you, the student and you.
That's great advice. Another attendee mentioned that she's teaching her students life skills, how to paint a bedroom, build a desk, even cut hair. So yeah, it's a unique time, and it's great.
I think I just wanted to say, I think that's so super. It's really getting the engagement and expectations and motivation, and really trying to show that, this is how we can be so resilient and make the best of this. And, you can also tie that into a history lesson and saying this is what they had to do during, the concentration camps or whatever. I think just to really be thinking of the box and how everything you do is really a teachable moment. We just don't always realize that.
Absolutely. Do you have ideas for a child that learns differently? Normally they have a resource at school that assists during class, at times one-on-one, but now they don't have that option working from home.
I would say, so one of the educators we talked to actually teaches in special education. And after my discussion with her, I felt much more aware of it's an additional layer of complications that comes with that. And for a lot of students, just the abrupt change alone it was wrenching. It's very hard to totally change your whole pattern of your day and your learning environment. And I really would say reach out to the person who is either your child's teacher, or if they still have access, to the person who's assisting them. I think every special ed teacher I've ever met is extremely resourceful, and I think that they can help you sort of problem solve and work through those things. I really think, and the other thing too is like that teacher will know your child as a student, which is, you might not know your child as a student as well as that teacher does. So that, to me, would be a time to really advocate and really communicate and really reach out. And then so I'd probably go straight back to the teacher for that one. What do you think, Lynn?
Yes, I mean, they're definitely going to have the best knowledge because they're the ones trained in that. But coming from it from a parent perspective now, I know there have been times when I needed to reach out to an educator for my children, and that educator wasn't available at that moment in time, and my child was having, a meltdown or something like that. And so then you have to kind of get into, panic mode and try to solve it. So I think taking a step back from whatever you're trying to get your child to do, whatever assignment it is, and realize it's not working, and saying, okay, I kind of understand the basic objective of this assignment, what the goals are, what else could I do that I know that will suit my child better? I know I had a student once that I was working with one-on-one to get through just to finish a history class so that he could get his high school diploma. And he had a variety of challenges that we were trying to work with. And so I found out he liked to do model building. And we literally, I refocused the whole curriculum on model building, and he ended up creating like some kind of a model, and it was like something he loved to do. And once we found that, and again, you're in the unique perspective that you know your child better than anyone else, but the problem is you're trying to use someone else's curriculum to get through this exercise. So again, if you can maybe try something that's just going to resonate with your child and to really help him or her get through that. And again, keep trying to get through to the school and getting those resources. But I know everyone in all the different school systems, they're working around the clock, and there's probably just not enough support to go around in some cases.
All right, we're getting lots of feedback here, lots of great feedback. People are loving the small celebrations parts, the
Yeah.
pause, reflect, reset organization. One thing they want to know if the pause, reflect, and reset slides for each of the categories would be available in the printables.
Yes, all of the slides we have as printables, and we want to share them. So please just send us an email at onlinegurus19@gmail.com. And I know Ryan's going to put that on the screen too. And again, we were only able to cover 2 chapters of our book really with this webinar. The book has 8 chapters of just incredible and information, and then activities that you could be doing with your children as well to kind of facilitate their experiences. Every chapter we offer some exercises that you can be doing on any learning management system.
Outstanding. We're about out of time for the day, but want to thank you, Jennifer and Lynn, for your help today. It's been a pleasure working with you, and you're certainly wonderful partners here at Kendall Hunt, and you've helped a lot of people, including myself today. So thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Ryan.
Attendees, I will be sending out a recording of this webinar probably tomorrow. And I'll also include the Online Gurus 19 email address if you have further questions. Thanks so much, and everybody stay well.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you. Have a good day.